Well, so a number of factors. And I think that in analyzing the media context, the broad indicators would be around legal and regulatory issues, political issues or the political environment, issues around independence of the media, professionalism of the media, questions around ownership, and then the general issue about safety of journalists. Now, and I think we can start it from the last point, which is the safety of journalists. People would always reference perhaps what has been the highest or the most grievous incident that we've recorded over the last at least 1 decade, the murder of Ahmed Swale. And government's, I would say, unwillingness to investigate the matter and bring the perpetrators to book. Apart from that, as you said, we've been monitoring incidents of media rights violations for more than a decade now. Under President Kufuor, there were about 64 incidents of, violations over the 8-year period. Then that reduced to 56 under the Mills Mahama 8 years. And because I did 8 years for Kufuor, it's okay to do Mahama Mills combined 8 years. And so we were witnessing a pattern of reduction. And that was also reflected in the Global Press Freedom Index. And even before the Press Freedom Index, Freedom House also used to do the Freedom of the Press Index. And so the pattern was reflected in both the indices by Reporters Without Borders and Freedom House then. So naturally, one would have been expecting that as our democracy continued to grow, we should be seeing a reduction in the incidence of press freedom violations. But that hasn't been the case. President Akufo-Addo's government is yet to be 8 years. Of course, it's just about 5 or so months away. But so far, we have more than 70 incidents recorded. So even far more than what was recorded under Kufuor's regime, where you would say, okay, that was a transition from the PNDC, NDC1, NDC2, and so we're still growing. And it's not just the numbers that even matter. What also matters is the gravity of the violations. So if you have a case of the murder of Ahmed Swale, we've had a case where national security have picked up Ajafor and his colleague, blindfolded them, picked them up from their office, took them to national security, blindfolded them, kept them for more than a day. When they were released, they claimed they were tortured, they were beaten up and all of that. And as I speak to you today, Ajafor's equipment are still in the custody of national security. And this is more than 4 years ago. And we still have these equipment in national security's custody. You remember the incident of your colleague, Latif Idris, and what happened at the police headquarters, the gravity of the violation. And we can go on and on and on. We've had incidents where, party tags or, people will just storm the studios of a media house and start assaulting a journalist. We've had incidents where journalists are beaten up mercilessly. And in most cases, what is even more saddening is the fact that people who commit the offenses go scot-free, And so the impunity with which these crimes or, violations are committed against journalists is another worrying development. Now, in all this, you would expect that the government of the day would conduct itself or act in a way that would send a message of deterrence to people who intend or actually perpetrate these acts. But unfortunately, if you recall, when we were all, advocating for justice in relation to the Ahmed Swale's murder and describing it as a very grievous press freedom violation, the president, in addressing the Bar Association conference in Takoradi about 2 or so years ago, said, it's unfortunate that people are referring to the Ahmed Swale incident as a matter related to press freedom. and said, look, a legislator was murdered in his house, and nobody has described that as an attack on the legislature. And I think that was really an unfortunate statement to make. Later, after a lot of pressure on him, he backtracked that, and then in another forum in Accra, then promised, and the forum was at the Press Media Freedom Forum. Then he says, look, we would make sure that we investigate and bring the perpetrators to book. And that has been how many years now? Nothing has happened. So in terms of the safety dimension, things have really deteriorated. And when you speak to journalists, they will tell you their fear. Again, to add, in 2019, and I always say that was one of the most hectic moments for me in my job, trying to assist Manasseh to be out of this country, following, the incidents of threats, and these were real, and in order to have him protected, we needed to do everything possible to get him out of the country. And issues of visa, because on what basis are you getting the visa? Are you going to tell the embassy that, this journalist is and he's running away? Would a visa be granted, or would it not be granted? It was a very, very hectic moment. Fortunately, at the end of the day, we were able to get him a visa to leave for South Africa. The following year, 2020, actually, ahead of the elections, and perhaps many people don't know this, ahead of the elections, Manasseh had to leave again for Germany for his safety. I don't think that Manasseh is somebody who is at a point where he will say, look, I'm trying to create something so that I can be out of the country or I can get a visa. This is not the type of person we are talking about. So the threats are real, and unfortunately, as people have said, we were expecting better under this government. It never happened. Look at the use of the law on fear and panic and false publication. It's been used under this regime more than any other regime that we know of, even though this was the same president who accused President Mills of applying that law to stifle press freedom, to censor journalists. And that was when, if you recall, your former colleague Ato Kwame Nadazi had said something about Ghana Real Estate Development Agency, GREDA, and then the police had invited him about, his source. And then there was another incident where a guy called Nana Dakwa or so had claimed that Rawlings had set his own house ablaze, and the police picked him up for false publication. President Akufo-Addo in 2011 had cause to accuse the Mills administration of abusing that piece of legislation, which he described as something that had, never been used, put in the shelves, but the government had picked it up, dusted it off, and is now applying vigorously because the government was bereft of the criminal libel law that it could have used against journalists. So if people are expressing fear and people are saying the risks for journalists have increased under this regime, these are the realities. It's not me saying. These are the facts. And it's not surprising, therefore, that we've moved from, in our press freedom ranking, from 26 in 2017 to 23 in 2018. That put us first in Africa, and then we moved on to 30, and from 30 we jumped to 60, and then 62nd, and now 2024 we came back to 50th, which is still not something that we should be proud of.